We are now talking to former Chargers and Viking punter, Darren Bennett. Darren, what's going on, man?
How are you guys?
We are good, man. I like that accent too, man. Is that Australian?
It started as an Australian accent, and I've been here 30 years now, and I'm still stuck with it. So it's over the years, we've had so many Australians come and stay with us. I think we keep the accents. When we haven't had people come for a while, if I talk to my brother, my wife says I talk through my nose all the time. So the longer I'm here and the more I'm in the Midwest here in Tulsa, I get a little bit of a Midwest roll to it. But otherwise, yeah, it's an Australian accent.
As everybody knows, we are talking to former Chargers and Vikings punter Darren Bennett. So, Darren, why don't we get into your career a little bit, and then we'll talk about your thoughts of what's going on with, obviously, the Chargers, the Vikings, teams that you played for, and what's going on in the league. Obviously, you're a guy that played a little bit of rugby in your time. Have a little bit of background at kicking, obviously. How did you start kicking a football? What made you decide that you should try out and play football?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back you up a little bit.
Okay.
I played Australian rules football, which is not rugby, totally different game.
Mm-hmm.
But the game that we play in the southern states of Australia is based on kicking. And so we already have those skills. I could kick probably, 55, 60 yards when I was 11 years old. And so as my career progressed, I started to slow down, in my mid-20s, and I had a lot of knee surgeries. I'm actually sitting on a couch rehabbing a double knee replacement right now.
Wow.
So, I had, over my career of Aussie rules and NFL, I had 20 knee surgeries, but I could still kick the hell out of a ball. And so my strength coach in Melbourne used to come across to training camp over at the Dolphins, and then he would go to the Cowboys, and he goes, man, I'll tell you, he goes, you couldn't run to save yourself, but you could out-punt these punters that are both on those teams right now. He said, so he arranged a tryout for me in San Diego, and I won a long kick contest in Australia and used the winning prize was 2 tickets to Los Angeles. And so my wife and I used it as a honeymoon, and on the honeymoon, I got a tryout with the Chargers, and they put me on practice squad in 94, and I went and stood on the sideline and watched San Francisco smash us in the Super Bowl.
So the consumption of the NFL with rugby and also, like you were mentioning, with Australian rules football in place, like what is it like in Australia when you were growing up there, watching the NFL and getting into the NFL?
Yeah, so the NFL, when I was growing up, now it's instant. I mean, we're in this instant gratification world, so I can click on, in Australia, any game at any time, ESPN, highlights. When I was playing, or when I was looking to do some research, we had a replay of the top 3 games, only highlights, 0 punts on a Tuesday night, 3 days after the game. So I never saw a punt live on TV. I never saw it recorded on TV until I came over. I sort of just went on my strength coach's say so. And then I went to a Seattle Seahawks game when we were on our honeymoon, and I watched the punters, and I tried to work out what the distance was they were punting and whether I could punt that. But I was very fortunate. Bobby Bethart's one of the greatest general managers in the history of the league. He's in the Hall of Fame. But for him to think outside the box and take an Australian straight off the boat who didn't know, I mean, I had no idea how to put a helmet, shoulder pads, anything on. But I hit some 80-yard punts on the field that day, and he saw some potential there, so he gave me a shot.
Darren, it says over here you're 6'5", 235 pounds. You're a big man. Field goal. Not field goal. Punt return kickers are very big in the NFL now, but not tall in length. They're just big. They have big legs and very strong upper body, and it's amazing. Some of them are physical specimens. They're just absolutely ridiculous. In the time that you played in the 90s, are the kickers different now than they ever were when you played?
The punters?
The punters, yes.
So Mark Royals was at Pittsburgh when I first started. He was 6'6". Then I was 6'5", and I think Rick Tootin was probably 6'4", and everyone else was smaller. So the trend now, we coach punters back in Australia. We see so many 6'4", 6'5" kids that are coming over to go to college. And Sav Rocker, who, he had a great Australian rules career, and then he came over and played at Philadelphia and also at Washington. Sav's 6'5", played at 260 pounds, so he's legit. I mean, we're not going to catch one of those returners, but if we do, we're going to hit him like a linebacker. So that was sort of the obligation that was bred into me when I first started, that if you get a chance to put your head in there, these guys do it every play. So, if you get to do it a few times a season, you should do it. And I thought I had a lot of fun doing it.
I remember Sav Rock. I'm a Giants fan. I grew up watching him when he was with Washington and with Philly, but I'm in the NFC East. And another one that I grew up when he was on the team was Steve Weatherford, another big guy. So maybe he got some of that influence from you.
Yeah, but see, Steve's only 6'2", so Steve was came and spent a lot of time with John Carney, who was my mentor at San Diego, and he mentored Steve and really helped him get through the second half of his career. And then Steve went on and had a terrific career in New York, so we it's a small community, NFL punters, and at any time during the off season, we probably would walk out on a field and most of those punters will come out and have a punt with us. So it's a pretty tight community, and we used to know most of the guys when we were playing.
So my question is, what you playing Australian rules football, then transitioning to the NFL, what were some of the biggest adjustments, both with coaching and with your technique as a whole?
So the biggest adjustment for me was learning how to wear a helmet and shoulder pads. I mean, we wear nothing. We wear a sleeveless shirt and a pair of shorts, and that's you go out and play football. And then trusting that all the guys in front of me were going to protect for me and they were going to form that pocket. And all I had to do was take care of my technique on rhythm at the right time, and we would get the ball off. And it was proven so many times. As I got more experience, I had Terrell Fletcher, who was my personal protector for about 7 years. And I would see the jersey from another team flash in front of me. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of a punt thinking, where are you, Fletch? And then all of a sudden, Terrell would just fly across and take that guy out in front of me, and we would get the punt off, So I think that was the biggest thing for me, was trying to go, if I went on my own rhythm and I don't use up too many yards, I have to trust that all these guys are going to protect for me. It takes a little minute to do that.
We are talking to former Chargers and Vikings punter Darren Bennett. Darren, what is it like being presented on the NFL's 1990s All-Decade team? Something like that, really being a standout as a punter in the NFL in the 90s with some of the best players of the league, and you were considered one of the best in the 90s at your position. What was it like knowing that you had that privilege of being a part of that All-Decade team?
I mean, honestly, someone called me on the phone and said, you're on the All-Decade team, and that was it. So it's not like we went and played against the 1980s team and see who was best, So it's not, that wasn't the reason I played the game. For me, it was the challenge of playing in two separate professional sports. So the accolades are great and, Pro Bowls and all that sort of stuff. But really, it was more about keeping your job every day and fighting off these young guys that came to every training camp trying to take your position.
So throughout the 90s, you played with the Chargers, and you played with a guy that very sad what happened to him passing away, in Junior Seau, one of the best linebackers in NFL history. Very sad what happened to him. So what was he like as a teammate on and off the field?
So the great thing about Junior is Junior did not have to know who I was. He was the star of the team, drafted in the first round, and by the time I got there in 94, he'd been to a few Pro Bowls. And so he came up and he grabbed me. I hit a punt, probably mini camp, and it was a bomb. I crushed it. And he came up and he called me the man with the kangaroo leg right there. And then we had Al Papunu and Don Sassa and Junior. And he grabbed me and said, you're one of the Islanders, bro. And I'm like, how do you even know who I am? And he's like, you keep hitting 80-yard punts like that, everyone's going to know who you are. And it really gave me the confidence to be accepted, because I was just a dude on the field trying to do my job. And to have the star of the team, Junior, know who I was and bring me in and sort of grab me around the neck and go, come on, man, you're going to help us out. That's how Junior was with everybody. So I'm sad like you are that he's not here anymore. I surfed with him 2 weeks before he passed, and we had no idea what was going on. But, we've lost a lot of guys off that Super Bowl team, but he was a giant in Southern California, in the Samoan community, and And with us, he was, a man amongst boys. So it was great to watch. And I was glad he was on our team and not on the opposition.
A couple of fans have a couple of questions for you. One of them says, who does he think is the most hated guy in Aussie rules footy? Because I still hate Luke Hodge. That was one of them. And another one said, did you appreciate punting in a dome?
So I love punting NFL balls. They go a mile if you get a good spiral on them. So I really love it. When I was playing in the 90s, I came and played a few exhibition Aussie rules games over here. And the guy that came over and did the promotion right before me was this guy named Mark Jacko Jackson. And everywhere we went, I went and did the promotions the year after, and everyone hated the guy. And he came over, and he was like a WWE wrestler playing Aussie rules football. So he turned up to do an interview like I'm doing with you guys right now with a T-bone steak on a chain around his neck, and he was calling it a blood sport. And, he offended a lot of people. So, but he loved it, So I would say when I was playing Mark Jacko Jackson was the most hated guy. And he was very famous for doing a handstand because a guy told him he'd never be a football player while his butt pointed to the ground. So he did a handstand in front of him and then explained to the people afterwards. So he was a bit of a clown, but a good football player at the same time.
So went to my next question nicely. You went from the Chargers to the Vikings, actually obviously growing up in Australia. So you're going to a cold weather city. Now you played in a dome, in the Metrodome, but you had to play against other rival teams in the NFC North that had the coldest stadium. So what was that kind of transition like, especially like Lambeau Field? You beat them in the playoffs.
I mean, I had two sons at the time, and we'd just been in Southern California. And I was at the point of my career where Mike Cyphers had been drafted to the Chargers. So I went and spoke to Marty Schottenheimer at the end of the year, and I said, look, Marty, we think between Steve Christie and I, we've mentored him for the year. We think he's going to punt 10 years, which we were right. He punted 12 years for the Chargers. And so it's time for me to go somewhere else. And so my knees were getting to the point where I wasn't really sure I was even going to pass a physical. And so the first place I went to was the Vikings, and it was so diagonally opposite to living in San Diego. I thought it'd be a great character thing for our kids to spend a couple of years in Minnesota. And it was. They'd still stay in contact with people they met over there. Luckily for me, Mike Tice, our head coach, hated the cold. He grew up in New York, played in Seattle. But literally two games into the season, we'd get our first cold day in Minnesota, and he'd go, okay, boys, inside, and we would practice inside for the rest of the year. So the toughest part about Minnesota was driving to practice in the snow, but we pretty much practiced and played inside for, 85% of the year.
I love Mike Tice, by the way. I met Mike Tice 3 times. He has a good family. He's a good guy. He's a Long Island native. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for Mike Tice. When you look at the league now and the transitional league, and I don't think punters are respected as much as they should be. And as the years gone by, they've become more important to the league and some of these Super Bowl contending teams. I mean, we talk about the Rams last year. They have one of the more underrated punters in the league, but nobody talks about him because of how good the defense is and how good the quarterback was, So and he made some of the best punt, kicks throughout the playoffs, especially against the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
I mean, not the New England. I'm sorry, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So what are your thoughts to the position as a whole? Do you think that some of these teams or some of the people in the league don't respect the position as much as they should?
Okay, so Johnny Hecker, who was the punter at the Rams, he's gone across to Carolina. Lachlan Edwards was at Carolina last year, and actually Mike Cyphers was the kicking coach there at Carolina. They switched everything around this year, and Lachlan called me this week and said, he's going to retire, and that was his last year in the league. But, Johnny Hecker's gone over there. Johnny was a game changer. I used the inside the 20 drop punt, but really only for inside the 20s. Johnny took that punt and misdirection spiral, and he's really made it his own. And so there's other guys that have tried to emulate that, but no one did it as well as Johnny. Now, he's getting towards the end of his career, and he's probably not as effective as he was, but he was when the Rams were good a few years back, Johnny was an absolute weapon for those guys, and his misdirection punts, he would hit a 65-yard punt walking right and punt it to the left sideline with the returner never touch the ball. You get a 65 or 68-yard net. That's a massive difference on a 100-yard field when you can get that and have the returner not touch the ball.